Welcome to the Higher Ed Huddle, where we discuss the most relevant topics in higher ed today. I'm your host, Joe Traino. I'm joined by my co-host, Brian Hadley, as we dive into all things AI. Today, we have a special guest, our colleague and all-around great guy, Tucker Cutter, Senior Manager in our MITG practice at BerryDunn. Tucker has been focused on AI for the last year, and we will be speaking with him on his thoughts and insights on AI, and maybe a few other topics thrown in there as well. So with that, Tucker, welcome. How are you today? It's good to have you. Join us.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. Brian, good to see you. Happy to be here. Hey, how do we get started?
Well, I think this is the first time you've been on this podcast, so it'd be good maybe just give our listeners a little background on who you are and what you do. Sure. So if you have a few minutes, maybe just to tell us who you are.
Sure. So senior manager with BerryDunn. Work in really two practices, one in higher ed, which is I think most relevant here, and in higher ed focusing and helping clients in our kind of digital and organizational transformation space. And so really what that means, it's around kind of strategic planning, it's around technology assessment, business process improvement, and really organizational design, kind of that crux of people, process, and technology, kind of how it all comes together, really helping clients solve challenges within higher ed.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and you also have a pretty decent golf game. Most of our listeners don't know that, but Brian and I think
most of us don't know that either.
Yeah,
we don't see it. We don't see it very often, but yeah.
I think golf game is certainly in the works. We'll hopefully shave a few strokes off this summer, but it's hard in Maine here in the wintertime.
This whole indoor golf is pretty popular, obviously in the colder states. Brian, did you purchase one of those indoor? What is it, like a scope?
The simulators?
Yeah, the simulator. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but
okay.
But, we're in the build process, so we'll get there.
What's interesting? I think we can kind of tie this to AI, and I think last conversation the three of us had, Callaway came out with a new set of clubs that were AI designed, right? AI software designed, which was kind of interesting. So, not sure if that helps with your golf score or make you swing better, but certainly they're pretty decent looking irons, I think. So
it's certainly not going to help my game, but it is kind of wild to see. Obviously we talk about AI all the time in the world that we live in, but to see that jump over to kind of the sports world and club design, how does that happen? It's everywhere.
And what's the advantage? What advantage is AI? I mean, we've been designing clubs for a couple hundred years. I don't know the history of golf, but I think it's back there. But I'm curious what AI brings to the table as far as designing, a club face or a club design. And I think that leads us to really our first question to Tucker. How did you get interested in AI? So we know we have some insight that, you're involved in some of the AI initiatives within our firm. What got you interested in that? Maybe talk a little bit about that, and maybe if you can share some updates on kind of where that stands within the firm, that would be a good place to start.
Sure. I guess coming to that first question around interest and what got me interested in it, I think it was something I just didn't understand it. Right? I couldn't wrap my head around it and kind of how AI was working, but also just sort of the scale and trying to fathom that. I mean, I feel like it's the most revolutionary technology since the internet, right? And the impact that it's going to have on kind of how we work and how we live, and just thinking about that is pretty interesting, and kind of thinking about what that's going to look like for us in our day to day. And so I think that really is what kind of got me interested in it, and kind of thinking about the scale and then change that's going to kind of escalate, I guess. And so in terms of the other question, Joe, around we've recently formed an innovation council within BerryDunn, and what that council is charged with doing is really thinking about how do we innovate and serve our clients better and and do things better internally. And that is not always, people often associate technology with innovation. I think it's not all about that. It could be about how we treat our people. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to innovate. But one of the initiatives that came forth from a kind of crowdsourcing initiative across the firm was around AI and developing AI strategy and how we're going to use it as a firm. And so I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that over the past year or so. And with any great technology, I think there are some concerns, right? Data, risk, and then what happens? How do we best position ourselves as a firm to be ready for AI? In particular, we're thinking about the technology of Copilot. And so it's out there. I mean, it's available. We were thinking about, I mean, if the Googles, Amazons, Microsofts of the world are still trying to wrestle with AI and how they use AI, we're not in the business or the position to kind of create a large language model for BerryDunn, right, at this point. But how can we use the tools that are available to change how we work? But also thinking about, we have so many different positions and jobs within BerryDunn. So where does it make sense? And I think there's some articles that have come out recently around Copilot and those folks that are using it, that they've been perfectly whelmed, right? They're not overwhelmed by how great it is in some areas, but they're kind of underwhelmed by some of the things that it can do. And so I think we want to approach it very strategically. And well, if we go down this road, what do we want to get out of it? What would make it worthwhile for us? And I think there's no doubt about it. In some areas, we are going to be using Copilot and other forms of AI, but maybe in some cases there's not the value. And so really approaching it kind of thoughtfully, rolling it out intentionally, and kind of thinking about how we do that as a firm is what I've been thinking about.
I think, Tugger, it's I mean, certainly good for us to hear what we as BerryDunn are doing, and I think it's important for other organizations to think about those kind of things that you just mentioned. One of the discussions that Joe and I had on one of our previous episodes was with Evan from the student perspective. Understanding now that students are entering the workforce already using these tools, right? Mm-hmm. So there will be an expectation once they join, whether it be BerryDunn or elsewhere, that they have access and will be using these tools. So it's already impacting our jobs and will continue to impact everyone's jobs. But what do you think we need to do in terms of kind of preparing for these students who will be joining us readily using these tools already?
I mean, I think at a minimum, right, we need to have the tools available for people to use that are capable of using them, right? And I'm thinking Copilot is the obvious one, right? I mean, if they're using that in kind of four-year university and then they are taking a step back when they move into their career, I mean, that's not acceptable, right? And from a recruitment and retention perspective, I think that's a real challenge for us if we're not there. And so I think Copilot specifically is a tool that as we roll it out and kind of do it in the pilot, people will see the value of it and people will want it, right? And so I think it will become kind of pervasive across, at least in the consulting work that we do. I'm less familiar with the kind of the accounting side and tax side, but I think creating PowerPoints, creating written Word documents, I think is going to be hugely helpful for first year staff. I think the thing that we need to think about as a management team is, how do we prevent people from leaning on the tools too heavily to really build those core competencies as a consultant, right? And I think that's where we need to focus. We need to give people the tools, empower people, but also make sure that they're using them in a way that is not creating risk for the firm.
And that's an existential risk as a whole for humans, right? Once you start relying too heavily on these tools, what happens to the human brain, I guess. But we won't go down that road right now. I think we said we were gonna keep it fun, so let's not go there yet.
Yeah, it's probably too serious of a topic there. In terms of risk, just a quick thought-provoking question, and this could be for both of you. What are your thoughts on letting our clients know if we're using AI in any of our deliverables or, leveraging some of these AI tools in the course of our work. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and that's interesting. Right? I mean, I think it depends on the type of our work that we're doing. I mean, if we're including recommendations and content that was created by a generative AI tool, so we have to tell people that we're doing that. Right? I mean, I think that is kind of an expectation. If we have kind of content created by somebody and it's a Word document, it's original BerryDunn, Joe Traino content, and we're saying, hey, AI, turn this into a PowerPoint, I think I'm less concerned with that. I think it's more of the original content creation, like much like you would cite a source, and we need to do that just out of best practice. I think we need to treat it in the same way.
That's a good
What do
point,
you,
Tucker.
yeah, what do you think,
So
Brian?
I mean, I agree. It's all about where does that content originate? Um, there's still, if we're using content from generative AI, we still have to understand that it could be incorrect, right? So there's no place for that type of content in any of the certainly in any of the deliverables that we would be providing clients, right? Um,
Yeah,
I think
there's
there are
policy
ways to.
too now, right? For the firm, like we were not allowed to use those generative AI
Well,
tools.
certainly, right. Most importantly, right, it would be against the policy, right? Um, yeah, I just think um, that we need to be careful about the content and how we're using it in client work.
Certainly.
Yeah, I agree. Um, so let's move on. I think one of the things we wanted to talk about is, our clients and how we can prepare them and assist them with AI. What are your thoughts on some opportunities for us to help our clients? I think policy development certainly is an area that we've talked about internally. Are there additional things that you see that we can help our clients with?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in the context of the work that I do in the digital and organizational transformation piece. I think around technology assessment. What are you using for tools? What could you use for tools? Thinking about process improvement opportunity and how things that are maybe kind of manual or kind of duplicative processes that could be automated with AI tools and identifying those sorts of things. I also think about just the long-term strategy in terms of AI and kind of where people are and what are their goals in doing it and kind of helping with some strategic planning pieces. I mean, I think those are some of the low-hanging opportunities in terms of the work that we're already doing for clients.
Brian, anything to add from your perspective? I know you do a lot of healthcare work as well. Anything that you see on the horizon that would be helpful for us to work with our clients on?
Yeah, Joe. I think one of the things that we've kind of tossed around the idea of as organizations or institutions start to investigate, how they're going to utilize these tools, of doing some sort of readiness assessment, understanding where they want to get to, what they have now. Um, One of the things we always talk about is data, right? So do they have data that is going to be usable in this context, in the context of AI? So I think those are the types of discussions that we're starting to have, and that we'll probably have more with our clients.
Yeah, I like
What do
both.
you,
I like both of your responses. Yeah, I think that's great. And I foresee the same initiatives there, and I think we're still in the early stages. Obviously, I mean, we're not seeing a lot of demand right now, but I think it'll pick up for sure. Brian, where did you have something else to add?
I had a question for the both of you
Sure.
in thinking about that, right?
Okay.
And thinking about when I think about AI, right? It's that kind of the Gartner hype cycle. Have you seen that where it comes up sort of the
Yeah.
peak of expectations and then it's like, oh wow, it can really do more, less than we thought. That's on the trough of disillusionment. And then you're coming up to the, what's that plateau of productivity kind of coming up to like level out. I guess in all of your conversations that you've been having and kind of things you've been seeing, where do you think we are in that cycle with AI?
I think we're beyond the hype, that initial excitement. I think
Yeah.
we're on that downslope. I've seen less activity. I've seen less discussion. I think when ChatGPT came out, there was a
Few
tremendous
summers
amount
ago,
of
yeah.
excitement and discussion, and people are trying it out. And now I think it's just, I think people have moved on to other things. I don't think it's as prevalent right now in higher ed. I think as people let things settle out, I think that's kind of where we're at right now. But I think the productivity piece, like how can we incorporate these tools into our productivity and reap some value or benefits out of it? Right now, there just seems to be a lot of I don't want to say disillusionment, but I think certainly in our conversations with faculty, CIOs, and students from a higher ed perspective, I think um, there's just some shaking out that needs to occur. And I think, initially there was a lot of concern about the use of these tools and the impact it was having on learning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, and I think a lot of folks have kind of set it aside for now just to see what else comes out of the tools just over the next year or two. But I think things will start to kind of shape up. I think there was so much out in the field as far as new tools that I think there needs to be some maturity and just some structure and how these tools are utilized in a productive way. And so I think that's why I think where we are in that curve, we're kind of in that bottom or starting to bottom out, and I think we'll start to kind of go back up, and we'll see more interest in it and more applicability in the higher ed space, maybe other industries as well. Obviously, other industries are embracing these tools significantly, but certainly for higher ed, that's why I think it's going to kind of shake out. There's a lot of discussions, but I don't think there's a lot of adoption right now.
I think I would mostly tend to agree. I think I would have said maybe had started to head up towards that plateau until was it yesterday or maybe the day before when GPT-4 just went completely off the rails and couldn't put together a coherent response at all. But that goes back to kind of what we were saying before is the risk of being over reliant on these tools. The fact is, it's still a piece of technology, and we all know that technology can break, and it just happened for GPT-4, right? So if we're relying on these tools, what do we need to do to be prepared for when it's not working, right? And I think that ends up being similar to other work we do. It's just another piece of technology, right?
Well, I mean, I think about that too, and like, what do we do when it's not working? Well, what do we do if the internet's not working, right? And
Yeah,
I
right.
always view this as a scale of like the internet, right? I mean, can we do
Right.
our jobs if the internet's not working? I don't know, honestly.
Right.
Um, yeah. The other thing I think a lot about is coming out is Sam Altman, right? He does this plan. It's like $7 trillion in investment in chips. And it's like, what does that even look like, right? In terms of scale and computing and kind of relative to where we're at now in terms of AI and processing power and capability. And down the road, I mean, is this on a J curve? And how does that affect things in higher ed, like research, right? Sponsored research for R1s and things like that. And how does that change the game? It's just going to be really interesting to see. I think the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not going to be long until we start seeing that kind of impact, I think. Tucker and I will be around for it.
I know I won't be, but before I go, I would like to have, and maybe this already exists, but an AI tool that will analyze my golf swing and give me pointers on, what I need to do to improve.
Joe,
Or even having, I was going to
we can
say,
make that happen.
or have an AI caddy. So, when you're on the course, the AI caddy will tell you exactly how the putt's going to break. How much, what distance or yardage. I know we have a lot of those tools already, but maybe just ramping it up with a little AI sprinkled in there, would be kind of cool.
Yeah, the problem here, Joe, is that you're the one that still has to take the swing.
Yeah, well, maybe an implant, some type of AI implant to help me swing better would be maybe something to wish for in the future as well.
All right.
So I'll add that to the list.
Okay.
So, we're just out of time here. So anything else that we want to maybe just drop on our audience before we kind of wrap up? Any other discussion, questions, statements, comments?
None for me. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, we really appreciate you jumping on with us. And, it is I kind of reflect back on just the conversations that we've been having over the last couple of years. And it is pretty exciting, to live in this time. You think about it. So it'll be, to your point earlier, Tucker, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years. I mean, we're just headed for some really awesome things, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens and to be a part of that journey. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you both are as well, and certainly looking forward to better golf days. So
we'll get there.
Okay. Certainly will. Thank you both.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate your time today, Tucker, and for our listeners out there, thank you for listening in. We are appreciative of Tucker and sharing his insights on AI. And Brian, thank you for joining me, co-hosting today. You can find our podcast on SoundCloud, Google, and Apple iTunes. Check back next month for another great topic and great guest. Until then, stay well.